All right, I gotta admit, this was good. Uh, I think I might have liked it more than Manhunter. Honestly, this movie had me from the beginning to end. Just I was hooked. Manhunter, I kind of dipped out here and there, but this was actually pretty good. Um, However, we are going to discuss the timeline of the movies, from Silence of the Lambs to this, you know, because it's very iffy on when this takes place, and when other films take place. It's very confusing. So, we'll get to that. Let's sit down and let's talk about it. So, right away, there's a big change. In Manhunter, we hear the backstory from William Peterson's version of Will Graham, where he says that he was consoling with Dr. Lecter in his office, in Dr. Lecter's office, when he realized that Dr. Lecter was the one he was looking for. He goes to use the payphone, and he's attacked by Lecter. Here, we actually start with a nod to a character that's actually been mentioned in the first three films in this continuity. There's a character who was supposedly killed by Buffalo Bill in the first one, and then they mention him, a flute player, is being killed by Lecter in Hannibal. They said it was Lecter that killed him, even though it was said in the first one that it was Buffalo Bill. I don't remember the guy's name, but here we see the flute player, and he's at the concert, and he sees that the flute player is terrible, and then we cut, and he's having dinner with these people, and he's serving special food, and it's the flute player, but, yeah. Then Will Graham shows up, talking about the case, and says that this killer is not taking the body parts, the organs, for souvenirs. He's taking them to eat them. Liver, kidneys, stuff you can eat. And then he realizes that it's Lecter, and Lecter stabs him, and he's arrested. Keep in mind, this part at the beginning of the movie takes place in the year 1980. Keep that in mind. Okay, and he's got a little pointy down the back of his head. We then cut to several years later, the film says, but the ending pretty much tells you it's 10 years, almost 10 years later, for reasons we'll get into. So, several years later, much like in Manhunter, Will Graham is now retired. And also much like in my Manhunter, Jack comes to visit him, and this time played by Harvey Keitel rather than Dennis Farina. He tells him, hey, I need your help, and this has the most returning characters, with Jack, albeit being played by a different actor now. He's being played by Harvey Keitel instead of Scott Glenn, but it's the character returns. Frankie Faison returns as Barney for a brief cameo. Of course, you got Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, albeit he looks older and it's supposed to be a prequel of him. And Anthony Held returns as Chilton. Excuse me. Honey, you're falling down. What did I tell you to go drink young Jack? There you go. There you go. I gotta figure out a way to keep her up there. But, so yeah. Basically, just like Manhunter, he brings him in. It's a little bit different this time. Where William Peterson's version was very, distraught, gruff, kind of traumatized. Edward Norton plays it straightforward, Mr. Nice Guy type character. It's a bit different. Which one do I prefer? Well, given what happened at the beginning of this film, William Peterson's version would work better, given what happened here. What he describes in Manhunter is a little more subtle. Given that we are shown specifically what happens in this one, maybe Peterson's take would have worked better with the beginning of this movie. Uh, so his wife, Molly, is played by Mary Louise Parker, and she's fine. Not big on Mary Louise Parker. She was in the Bruce Willis movies Red. She's fine. Not big. Was never a fan of Weeds. Not big. She's okay. She's probably the worst in this movie, but even it's not bad. You know what I mean? Well, no, she's second worst. The actress they got to play the blind lady in this, I don't know what she's doing. Half the time, I don't think she is actually blind. Like, she's looking right at the actor, and she should be looking like this as she's talking. But this time, she looks right at Ralph Fiennes. We'll get to him when she's talking to him. She shouldn't know where he's standing. It's very weird. Ralph Fiennes as the Red Dragon killer, Dollarhide, is fantastic. Sorry, Tom Noonan, but Ralph Fiennes blows you out of the water. He could almost contend in a face-off with Anthony Hopkins. What the fuck Anthony Hopkins is doing in this movie? He is going over the top almost deliberately. He said this was his last time playing Hannibal Lecter, and it's almost like he doesn't give a fuck because he just sometimes the way he does with his accent just goes way out of norm, way off the deep end, and it's just weird. The movie is basically verbatim Manhunt, with a few subtle changes, such as the message going out saying that going out in the paper saying that from Lecter telling Dollarhide to attack Graham's family happens earlier in this film, at least I think it does, and that results in Jack already has it ready to go, taking him out. And we get some foreshadowing that wasn't in the original. He teaches his wife how to use a gun. I'm like, oh. But that's not coming back anytime soon. Wink, wink. And also, yes, if this movie was made today, people would call it woke because of what happens at the end. But you know what? It's fine. It's a nice change. And it might even be from the book. Who knows? You know, the wife, Molly, in the original, she didn't really do much but hide with her son. So, here's that. Yes. And, yeah. So, yeah, basically, once again, Lecter is sidelined. Although I think he's in this a little bit more than Brian Cox was in Manhunter because it's Anthony Hopkins, so he gets a little bit more. He's just a little bit more. Especially at the end, they actually have a callback to Silence of the Lambs, which we'll get to. But, that. And then we also see that, the scene with him and the blind woman is different, as she gives him a blowjob and he's watching his videotapes, you know, and we don't see it, of course, but then, you know, it was a sex scene in the original, now there's that, and then there's implied they had sex. Once again, he doesn't want her in the house, all that stuff. He's got tattoos on his back in this one. He eats a painting, which is weird. I don't think he does that in the original. And then, maybe he does. I don't remember. Okay. So, yeah. And it all comes down to a showdown not at his house. They do a false ending where they make you think he killed himself because he was going to shoot Reba, the blind lady. He couldn't do it. So he makes it believe that he killed himself. But instead, it's found out it's actually Frank Whaley's character, Ralph, that he killed earlier on in the film. It's a little bit before this that they got. And he actually has made his way to Graham's house where he's got his kid. And we have the fight there. There's a shootout. They both get knocked down. And Molly grabs the gun, of course, and shoots him. And it's all done very quickly. It's kind of anticlimactic, really. There was this big showdown between the two. I mean, freaking Graham, William Peterson's Will Graham jumped through the window to In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida Baby in that one. Here, it's just, and then she shoots him, and he's dead. Yeah. But let's talk about the ending. So, Hannibal Lecter writes Will letters saying best regards, whatever, stuff like that. And then Chilton comes in. He says, there's a young lady from the FBI here who wants to speak with you. And they said, oh, I figured you'd say no. I'll go tell you. I said no. And he's like, what is her name? So this implies that Silence of the Lambs takes place right after Red Dragon. And holy shit, does that mess up the continuity. Let's talk about it. The beginning of this film, as mentioned, takes place in 1980. Which means that this is relatively 10 years later, just before the events of Silence of the Lambs. However, in Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter states that he's been in that cell for 8 years. Which means whoever wrote this movie and thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we tipped our hat to Silence of the Lambs, didn't actually think, didn't actually maybe watch the movie or didn't think about what they were doing. He just decided, hey, let's put a little tip to the hat. Let's do a nod to Silence of the Lambs at the ending of this. And it screws up the continuity. Alright? It screws up. I already saw the beginning of this took place in 1980, and I was like, wait a minute. And then I was doing some research, looking at stuff on Wikipedia, and this says it takes place in 1980, right at the beginning of it. And then Hannibal Lecter says he's been there for 8 years. But that would put The Silence of the Lambs in 1988. However, it's very clearly 1990 because Hannibal, taking place 10 years later, takes place in the year 2000. So, no. Whoever wrote this movie fucked up. They wanted to put a nod to Silence of the Lambs, but didn't think about the continuity and messed it up. I don't even want to know what this thing's going to do. But this was good, man. I'm going to say pretty good. So, yeah, it was... So that little continuity thing, it was actually pretty good. Almost as good as Silence of the Lambs, but not quite as good. Silence of the Lambs is still better than this, but... I feel like Hannibal Lecter works better as a side character instead of a main character. You know what I mean? Like, he was on the forefront of Hannibal because the character was made, and so they wrote the book, and he was put in the forefront. And I heard the book sucks, and the movie sucks, apparently. I don't think it's that bad, but it's not as good as these two. Or Manhunter. It's come out before it, but... yeah, this was pretty good watch. Don't have high hopes for this. I hear this is the worst one, so we'll see. I'm intrigued only because I want to know if that's Richard Brake. I'm still wondering, but I'll be getting that soon. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on Red Dragon? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I've been Scotty, and I'll see you in the next one.